Perfect. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This session is going to be all about the how. So really how we as trainers can build memorable launch experiences that really stick, ultimately with the goal of driving field performance. So as I said, we're going to dig into the how, not so much the what. We're not going to be talking about what training agenda you need to have or what modules you need to build. It's really going to be more about the types of questions you should be asking in order to create a really memorable, immersive experience for your launch. We're going to talk a little bit about the creative mindset that you want to have, and importantly, the role of emotions in driving really exceptional experiences. If we go to the next slide, before we get into all of that, we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves. So I'm Natasha. I'm a senior manager here at Metrics. I've been with the company for a little over 4 years, and I've supported on a few launches in my time. And I'm joined here by Andrea. She's one of our very talented senior managers. She oversees medical writing and learning design at Metrics, and she's one of our resident launch experts. So she's got a real knack for making really memorable experiences. So yeah, very excited to have her joining us today. And we're speaking proudly on behalf of the wonderful team here at Metrics. So if you're not familiar with Metrics, we are an agency that helps life sciences companies elevate internal team performance. We've been doing that for over 35 years. And I'd say the thread that really has been pulled through since the beginning is just our passion for behavior change. So we're really are always looking at ways that we can design what we like to call next-gen learning experiences that drive real measurable performance, especially for the field. So yeah, hopefully you'll see how that comes together in today's session. So let's get into it then. I think we're all here because we want to figure out how to make launch trainings great. It's certainly the million-dollar question. I don't think I need to say this to this group, but I'll do it anyway. Launches really are a once in a life cycle moment, right? It's a moment you really need to get right. It's super critical, and it's not easy. So obviously there's some numbers here on the slide. I won't go through it all, but it's all to say that launches, they tend to fail to meet expectations, right? And there's a lot of data that shows, there's some studies from Deloitte that shows that the early performance post-launch is what really matters most. So there's a lot of research that shows that when we start really strong, we have really early performance, the brand tends to perform better throughout its life cycle. So what that means, Andrew, if you just click once more, as trainers, we have a very narrow window to create a lot of momentum, right? And if we go to the next slide here, I think, a lot of us, we know this, we know it's really important, and yet there's so much information that we need to jam pack into launch. So we spend so much time informing and sending out tons of content. And it's not to say that that's not important to do. You absolutely need to make sure that people have the clinical data and the selling skills and all of that good stuff. But the best launch training also makes space for transformation. It makes sure that people leave feeling energized. Like this is really a pivotal moment that they get to be a part of, that they know exactly what they need to do right on day one. So why does that matter? Like, why should we really even care about making launch training or training in general emotional or memorable? And the short answer is that it's not just because it's fun, it's because it actually works. And I'm sure there's many of you on the call who are already familiar with this, but behavioral science, it tells us that in order for something to stick, for us to really care about it and for us to change our behavior, we need to be motivated. We need to actually care about the thing that we're doing. And some people will argue to me that, sales reps, for example, they're already motivated, right? They have the financial incentives, they have all the perks with the roles. So those can certainly be great drivers to performing well in the field. But that kind of motivation can only take us so far. It can drive activity, but not always how people show up. So that's how we like to think about it. That's where this model comes in. So at Metrics, we use BJ Fogg's behavior change framework. He's a professor out of Stanford University. And his philosophy is that behavior happens when you have a prompt, when you have ability, and you have motivation. And all those three pieces come together. So training and sustainment nudges and, refresher training, whatever, that's all the prompt. That's the reminder, the push to act. As trainers, we obviously have a lot of work to do to build ability. So that's the knowledge, the disease state training, the PI training, et cetera. The skills are all about the selling skills, using storytelling, et cetera, et cetera. But the differentiator here and where we're going to focus on today is motivation, specifically emotional motivation. Because what really drives behavior in the field that we've seen time and time again is something a lot deeper. I think it was about a year or two ago, we did an analysis with a sales force across the US, and we basically asked them, like, what gets you out of bed every day? And the answers, one of the most frequently cited answers was that people just are passionate about delivering their clinical message. They want to be partners to their customers. They want to be able to support the bigger picture around patient impact. So that sense of purpose, the belief in the story, the connection to patients, being that, strategic partner to your customers, that can really drive behavior for a lot of people. And that's going to be what fuels things like empathy and judgment and going the extra mile in your conversations. So, it's really important, to pack as much as we can into a launch training. There's obviously so much that people need to know. But if we don't take a step back and intentionally design the training and that whole agenda to make space for emotion, those prompts, all those trainings, they might not stick the way we want them to. So with all that said, we'll get into what we're really here to share with you today. So if we go to the next slide, Andrea, we're going to spend some time going through a simple framework for designing launch experiences that we think you can adopt. It's pretty straightforward. You can use it with your team, with your existing vendor, or if you need a brainstorming buddy, you could certainly feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to go through it with you as well. But we wanted to do something a little bit different than your typical webinar and do a bit of like a role play exercise. You can kind of see what these conversations might look like and what this kind of brainstorm might be. So over to you, Andrea, to kick us off.
Thanks, Natasha, for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. As Natasha mentioned, we're going to go see our launch experience framework today in action. And rather just walking through the framework, we're gonna do a little role play. And in this role play, Natasha is going to be the director of commercial excellence at Orion Therapeutics, which is a fictional organization we're going to use for the role play today. And I'm a senior manager at Metrics, and I'll be facilitating a visioning session to prepare for the launch. I'll guide you through the types of questions we typically ask to uncover the launch vision. We're going to ask questions that will shape the learner experience and define the impact of the launch. And then we'll, at the end, show how we begin translating that information into some actionable launch concepts. So before we dive in, I want to do some level setting for the role play. As I mentioned, Natasha's with Orion Therapeutics, and they're launching Vesmira, which is a first-in-class therapy to treat progressive neurovascular myopathy. You may be wondering what PNM is. It is a fictional disease, so it does not exist, but we're using it today for the role play, and same with Vesmira being a fictional therapy. But we'll tell you a little bit more about those. PNM is a progressive genetic disease, so a rare disease. Patients are often misdiagnosed, and the disease is managed symptomatically right now. PNM has a high disease burden, and there's low HCP awareness. Vesmira has a complex reimbursement and access process, which is definitely a barrier. And because of these key details, there's a high onus at Orion for field teams to not just sell Vesmira, but also to educate about the disease. All right, let's get started. So hello, Natasha. Thanks for joining today's launch visioning session. In our previous call, you mentioned that you're going to be training all of your customer-facing teams and that you have about 6 hours of workshop time for each audience, which is great. We also talked a little bit about your budget. So Now, today you might be thinking let's just jump into agendas and the training design. But I really want to step back and first align on the foundation for our launch planning. Today is really about grounding ourselves in the key elements of our launch experience framework, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. And then, yeah, this session really is going to help us establish that clear North Star so that everything we build stays connected to our core goals and objectives. So here's a launch experience framework. There are three key elements we focus on when planning a launch. The first one being the vision. What are we trying to create and why? And why does this launch truly matter? Two really important questions. That strong strategic alignment is super critical up front. We want to ensure that we have all the stakeholder buy-in from the very start and that the training plan and overall brand story feels really cohesive. Second is the experience. What should the learner experience feel like? It's not just about the content or how many workshops we can fit into launch week. Launches are emotional moments, as you know, for organizations. So we need to think about what we want the learner experience to feel like. When training is more memorable, you'll find that people feel more connected and then they engage more deeply, they retain the information better, and ultimately execute a lot more effectively in the field. Lastly, we have impact. So what should be different afterward? This isn't just about delivering training. It's about changing behavior and driving results. So we'll also explore what we want learners to be thinking, feeling, and doing after the launch to set them up for success in the field. All right, so let's begin with the vision. So, what are we being asked to create, Natasha? From an organizational and leadership perspective, how is success being defined for Besmira? If we fast forward, let's say 6 months post-launch, what does leadership hope that cross-functional partners, HCPs, or patients are saying about your field teams? I'm going to make some notes as you share.
All right. So, from a leadership perspective, what I'm hearing consistently is that you want field teams to be credible, trusted partners. So, not just promoting the product, but helping build awareness and understanding of the disease. 6 months in, I think success would look like HCPs recognizing the disease earlier, identifying appropriate patients with more confidence, and seeing Besmera as a meaningful option. And internally, I would say leadership is focused on strong alignment across their commercial, medical, and access teams so that execution feels a bit more cohesive with the overall strategy.
Great. That's really helpful context. So, building on that from the marketing team's perspective, what is the story that they want field teams to tell? What do they want HCPs to walk away remembering?
So our marketing leadership is really focused on making sure Bessemer is positioned as a breakthrough, of course, being, in a space where there hasn't been progress in the past. So really focus on the unmet need. And ultimately they want customers to walk away knowing three things, which is how to identify the right patients, why this product addresses that major unmet need, and then what the next step would look like for patients. So everything from like diagnosis all the way through to navigating access and reimbursement. So again, it's a really simple patient-centric story, super actionable.
Great, thank you. And lastly, from the medical side, how are they expecting the field to show up? What should HCPs walk away understanding or feeling more confident in?
So for medical, definitely making sure the field is grounded in the science, but they can communicate it clearly and confidently. So making sure HCPs really understand the disease biology and like where Vesmera fits into that, and why it's appropriate for specific patients. We also want the field to be able to like really confidently handle some of those more in-depth evidence-based questions just to help build some of that trust at the beginning. But of course, making sure everything's compliant as well.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing all that information. Next, we'll talk about why this launch matters. So, why this launch matters. This is such an important piece because when learners understand not just the disease and the product, but why this launch matters, the role they play, and what the organization is really asking them to achieve, it makes training far more meaningful and motivating. So, Natasha, why does this launch matter?
From a leadership perspective, I would say the launch is really about addressing that significant unmet need that we talked about earlier. So, a big part of that is going to be enabling HCPs to better recognize and understand like what PNM is, how they can diagnose with more confidence, how they can take action sooner, et cetera. For the organization, it's definitely an opportunity for us to lead in a space where there hasn't been progress. And again, we're bringing forward something that's very differentiated. And then for the field, their role is going to be really critical in shaping like how patients are identified, how HCPs approach managing the disease. And then really important is how to help patients navigate reimbursement and actually get their hands on the medicine.
Thanks, Natasha. Yeah, this why becomes really important to us because it should act as the red thread throughout the entire launch. So, shaping not just what we train, but how we design the experience and how the field shows up. So, this is all really great information. Okay, so on to experience. When we're talking about experience, we focus on two areas, and they're highlighted in blue font here. So the first one being emotional design, and that is about intentionally shaping what people feel throughout the experience. Whereas experience architecture is about intentionally designing the journey. So I want to explore both of those with you.
All right, let's do it.
Great. So when you think about this launch experience, what do you want attendees to feel during the event, and what should they walk away feeling?
So during the experience, we definitely want them to feel energized and confident. So we want them to kind of feel like they've received everything they need so they can actually hit the ground running on day one. Also important is purpose and clarity. So we want them to really recognize that this isn't just, a product launch. This is about patients who've been missed for years.
Perfect. And how do you want this experience to shape that sense of purpose and connection across the group?
One thing that's really important for us is to have this alignment around a shared mission. So we're going to have a lot of reps with mixed backgrounds, different tenures, different perspectives. Maybe they have experience in rare, maybe they don't. So we want to create a space where people can learn from one another. We want a lot of information being shared back and forth around what's working in the field, what questions are coming up, especially in those first few weeks after launch. On top of that, we have customer facing teams across, field sales, medical access, patient education. They're all calling on the same HCPs. So we really want to make sure we have this thread of like a one team mentality where everybody knows that they can work together fluidly. So knowing, a sales rep knows how to compliantly loop in access or work with medical towards a common goal. I think that's going to be really important.
Awesome. Okay, so creating a space for connection, sharing, real-time learning. That's really great. And what kind of overall energy or culture do you want people to feel part of? And how should this experience really enforce that?
I'd love for this to be more collaborative than some of the other programs we've run. Like we really want to have energy, curiosity, and active participation. So we don't just want people sitting there and like downloading content. We want them to like roll up their sleeves and even try like co-creating some solutions or thinking through some tactics with us. Like we want them to feel like they're part of shaping the outcomes that they're going to create.
Great, I love that. And if we zoom out to the full experience, what design choices would make this feel really different from a typical launch or training event? Think about things like flow, structure, leadership presence.
Yeah, I would say like intentional. So we don't want just like a series of sessions, one after the other, where people just feel like totally drained by the end. I think that's going to be really important, just making sure there's a lot of energy. One thing that would be great is having leadership involved throughout the full launch week. So not just at the beginning or end. And then we also want to bake in some like memorable moments. So it feels again more like a cohesive journey, not just a bunch of content.
Great, that's all really helpful. This really gives us a good foundation for thinking about how to bring that experience to life visually and structurally. Next, we'll look at our final element, which is impact, and look how we want, what kind of impact we want to launch the launch to drive. So, when we think about impact, we're thinking about, what should be different afterwards. So, with that in mind, what moments in this experience should people still be talking about weeks later, and why?
I think it'll be the moments that connect people back to the patient experience in a meaningful way. Um, Certainly. But I also think we want to create these like aha moments where they can, connect the dots between the clinical data, patient journey, the customer conversations that they're going to have. I know our reps get really excited when they're able to bring everything together to tell a compelling story. So if we can create moments where they can start to craft their own stories in preparation of being out in the field, I think that'll be really exciting.
Absolutely. That connection point is really critical. How do we tap into what motivates this group? And just so it's not just an experience they attend, but something that drives lasting behavior change in the field.
Yeah, I think at our core or at their core, the field's going to be really motivated by creating patient impact. So knowing that the work they're doing is making a difference. They're also motivated by the fact that they're, seen as trusted partners to their HCPs, um, being able to bring real value, provide education, help, real patients get access to, the medicine, not just being someone delivering product information, right? So if we can build their confidence in the science and, show how that's going to translate into better patient care overall, I think that will really drive lasting behavior change.
That's great. And lastly, what should reps think, feel, and do differently after launch?
Right. I think we want them to think differently about the disease and their role in the conversation. So they will need to know the clinical data inside and out. But I really want them to think of themselves as, like, again, a supportive, strategic field partner, and also get into the habit of thinking about how and where they can strategically collaborate with some of their other field counterparts in medical and access. In terms of what they should feel, I would say, confident, energized, connected to, the broader purpose of the launch. I want them to feel like they are part of something bigger, like they're really critical levers to the business. And then lastly, I mean, I think there's a few things they should do differently. Obviously approaching calls with stronger pre-call planning and strategy, but also just having more purposeful, disease patient identification conversations, using storytelling, being able to educate and sell using that brand story, and also just being more proactive partners to their customers. So not necessarily as your traditional sales rep, but as a really supportive partner to the HCP. Um, and then also, I would say we'd love for them to continuously learn. Like those first few weeks after launch are going to be so important. This is a totally new space. There's going to be a little bit of trial and error as we figure out what works. So we want them to know how they can leverage their peers or, share best practices, share insights, raise their hand if something's not working. We really want them to know that they can and should do that and kind of help build on that collective knowledge over time.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. The session's been really, really helpful. I think we've defined a really clear vision, a purposeful experience, and the impact that we want to drive in the field. So together, this gives a strong foundation to design, a launch experience that not only aligns to strategy, but also truly enables the field to execute with confidence and impact. Um, so with that, just going to go to the next slide. And at Metrics, we created this vision board for you based on this discussion with some ideas that can help make this launch a little bit more memorable and a really successful one. So we'll start with one theme we heard quite a bit from you, which is the idea of purpose. One thing that was really clear is that we need to integrate the patient perspective a lot throughout the launch. I'm thinking we can do this in a few ways. Um, We'll have a section dedicated to the PNM patient experience and another focused on the patient experience as they navigate diagnosis and access to care. This will help incorporate that access and medical lens you were talking about into the training, a great way for customer-facing teams to collaborate, and it's a great way for the field to begin practicing embedding their storytelling into their messaging. We'll also want to layer in that emotional piece, as we talked about earlier. I'm thinking we'll really spend some quality time exploring what the day in the life of a patient would be. We can use digital tools like videos, as well as actual patients that attend the event and share their experience, which could be quite powerful. Each participant could also have a patient journey passport where they record key insights, milestones, emotions connected to the patient experience. We're also thinking a large format empathy map could be really good to complete in like a group setting, and other reflection activities that can encourage the learners to further distill and really take a moment to consider the realities for patients and caregivers. So, for example, this myth versus truth activity we really like. Lastly, to make it interactive, we're thinking a physical patient experience station where learners can really walk through a gallery and read or experience stories from actual patients, seeing or hearing, all the challenges that they encounter and how it impacts their everyday life. This could be a moment where people, recharge with a cup of coffee and experience the patient reality through a quiet reflection. So, how's that all sounding so far?
So far, so good. Keep going.
Great. Bear with me, it's a little slow. Okay, so now let's think through the other themes from our conversation. We talked about readiness and making sure that learners are ready to go on day one. So there's lots of different things we can do to make these activities really effective. But let's talk about how we can make them more memorable. So I'm picturing some competitive elements. We could do an escape room, leaderboards, or include some time games that makes them reps really excited and they're also getting some practice along the way. We can make it stand out by incorporating physical artifacts like desktop tools, field trinkets, memorabilia that will really help them remember the day, but also help them in the field. And maybe some AR and VR experiences to get them in the driver's seat. I know it's also important for your teams to feel like they're truly part of the business strategy and playing a role in shaping outcomes. So let's give them this opportunity to co-create some solutions with you, actually design the sales tactics or approaches that will actually show up in their playbooks later on. We can even add a theme to help them find their purpose. Those ones are really cool. And then switching gears here to talk about that one team mentality for customer facing groups. This makes a lot of sense for your context, but we also need to balance compliance at the same time. So I'm picturing a guided session that helps field medical, field access, and field sales teams think through all like that typical customer journey and all the moments they individually play. And then maybe we can guide them towards identifying, that synergistic moments where they can align their approach to become better partners and create better outcomes for HCPs. They can explore how they work together and then discuss, in our first 6 months post-launch, how are we going to work together? So this really makes it actionable, and that social learning experience alone really is useful. But let's create we got to think about really creating a memorable experience that people will never forget. So we got to shake things up a bit. And we can't underestimate the power of fun. So maybe we bring in musical activities that serve as an energizer, maybe after lunch. The concept of one team can be layered into those activities. And we can also bake those moments throughout the launch week to make it really fun, such as an activity where, everyone creates a mechanism of action or the disease pathophysiology in a creative way. So, what do you think?
Sounds good. I know we're at times. I wonder if we just jump to the takeaway slide, Andrea.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, go ahead.
No, so this was just a summary slide on our framework here and what we covered today. So you'll be able to come back to the recording to read a little bit more and kind of screenshot that if you'd like. And yeah, this brings us to the end of our talk. And I just really hope that you take away, the one thing, and it's the importance of creating memorable experiences because people don't remember what they've learned uh, nearly as much as they remember how it made them feel. That's the big thing. They want to walk away remembering those moments. So get creative, create a memorable, emotional, and motivating experience, and thoughtfully weave in the content along the way to make that impact. And that's the power of starting with behavior. When you solve for how people actually learn, their performance will follow. I'll pass it back to you, Natasha.
Great. Yeah, just to wrap up, thanks for anybody who's stayed on a little longer with us. If we go to the next slide, feel free to get in touch with us if you have questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for a Q&A, but happy to connect on LinkedIn or email.